to the 24th episode of Ship of the Week, in which we take a look at another 19th century passenger liner, the story of which sports quite a few cameos in other well-known events. One of the many British Atlantic firms born in the mid-19th century, the Inman Line, founded in 1850 by Mr. William Inman, was one of the largest. The company stepped into the United States mail contract void left behind when the American company Collins Line folded in the late 1850s, and the line spent the next several decades steadily growing its assets and market share. By the 1880s, amid rapid technological advancement in liner construction, Inman wanted ships to compete with the other major British powerhouses at the time, White Star and Cunard, and the Scottish shipbuilders John Brown, then known as the J&G Thomson Company, were contracted to build two sisters, one of which would become City of New York. Over the next year and a half or so, workers scurried over the gantries as the ribs and plating of the new liner grew. The ship was fitted with two triple-expansion steam engines powering the two screws seen here, designed to give the ship a top speed of approximately 20 knots. The ship's hull was ready by early 1888, and she was launched on March 15th by Lady Randolph Churchill, the American-born mother of Sir Winston Churchill. As completed, the ship was 560 feet in length and displaced more than 17,000 tons. Her splendid first-class interiors and impressive speed made her and her sister, City of Paris, instant celebrities. The patriotic sentiments of this is evident in her appearance on this packaging material. The aforementioned speed of the new ship was not immediately as fruitful as that of City of Paris, which successfully snagged the blue ribbon for the Atlantic record, with City of New York trailing a hair behind her. But she was fast enough to engage in the all-too-common phenomenon of Atlantic racing. White Star Line's darling express liner at the time, RMS Teutonic, raced City of New York in 1890 with the White Star ship only beating the Inman liner to England by mere hours. When Inman Line underwent a restructuring in 1893, the British government rescinded the company's registration and mail contracts, so the line turned to the United States, which needed to do some legislative finagling in order to allow foreign-built ships to register in the U.S., but following a visit from President Harrison and with the stars and stripes fluttering at her masthead, SS City of New York was transferred to the American line and renamed simply New York. Now an American steamer that placed New York within the purview of the United States for use in times of war. And war came in 1898. She commissioned as the light auxiliary cruiser USS Harvard under Captain Charles Cotton. And in this role, Harvard made multiple voyages to the Caribbean as a scout ship and transport, placing her in Cuba on July 3rd for the Battle of Santiago de Cuba and the utter destruction of the Spanish fleet there. She decommissioned and returned to American Line and her old name later that year, and in 1901, New York underwent a massive refit that saw her funnels replaced and one removed entirely, her power plant upgraded to quadruple expansion equipment, and general modernizations throughout the ship, the work taking until early 1903 when she was able to return to the Atlantic seemingly as a new ship. She operated for nearly a decade as an increasingly dated yet comfortable liner until April of 1912, when her crossing from Southampton to New York amid a national coal strike in Britain was cancelled in order for another ship, operated by American Line's parent company, the International Mercantile Marine, to take her suddenly much more valuable supply of coal. New York wasn't the only ship laid up for the effort, however, because the ship in question was quite large. She was the new White Star flagship, Titanic. Things were going well for Titanic as she steadily steamed out of Southampton until she passed the much smaller New York, tied up against the starboard side of RMS Oceanic. The enormous wash of the new superliner's propellers exerted such force on the steel cables holding New York in place that they parted, with retorts described to sound as heavy gunfire, one after the other. Suddenly free without any steam up to maneuver, New York was drawn in toward Titanic closer and closer, with passengers clustering against Titanic's portside rail expressing growing concern. It was only the quick actions of Captain Smith aboard Titanic, in ordering her port engines full astern, and the captain of the tug Vulcan getting a hold of New York, that prevented the two liners from colliding. Titanic continued happily on her way. Of course, history would go on to list this incident among the countless what-ifs concerning Titanic. Had a collision with New York forced Titanic back to Belfast, she might have lived the career envisioned for her. As it turns out, New York would only serve a few more carefree years as an express liner before the war in Europe placed a burden on her, flying the flag of a neutral nation to carry displaced traffic from the laid-up ships of the belligerent powers. Carrying those fleeing the war to the United States was indeed quite the lucrative gig, until April 1917, when the United States entered hostilities with Germany, and guns were hoisted aboard the liner. An incident in early 1918 while under escort to Liverpool resulted in New York accidentally firing on USS Jenkins, one of the ships in company with her, whose crew is seen on the forecastle of their ship here. One sailor aboard Jenkins was killed by the incoming shot, and the destroyer threw on her lights in an effort to get New York to stop firing, which she did upon realizing her mistake. In May of 1918, the U.S. Navy seized the ship for use as a trooper, commissioning her as USS Plattsburgh. She made several outbound crossings packed with soldiers, reversing the shuttle service for several more crossings once the armistice was signed, and the remainder of the old liner's career was relatively short and uncertain, passing through multiple operators, each with little luck, until she was eventually scrapped in 1922.